The Book of Exodus, chapters 21 through 24, opens beneath the lingering thunder of Sinai. The mountain still trembles from the voice that split the heavens. Israel stands at the foot of fire and thick darkness, hearts still quaking from the 10 words that carved covenant into the air. But now the lightning recedes into law. The God who spoke from flame begins to shape daily life. Mishpatim judgments, not random rules, not cold legislation. These are the weights and measures of covenant love pressed into the clay of human relationships. The voice descends from the heights of glory into the dust of ordinary life. When you acquire a Hebrew servant, the Eternal One begins not with kings, not with priests, but with the lowly. The Hebrew word for servant is avad. Ayin is sees. Bet is the house. Dalet is the door. The servant is the one whose eye is toward the house, who stands at the threshold. In Hebrew thought, servanthood is not degradation. It is belonging under authority. Israel had been slaves in Egypt, but that bondage was crushing, lifeless. Here, the Torah shapes a different servitude, bounded, dignified, temporary. 6 years he shall serve, but in the 7th he shall go free. 6, the number of man, formed on the 6th day. 7, the number of completion, rest, covenant, fullness. Even in servitude, the rhythm of creation pulses. Bondage is never permanent among a redeemed people. Freedom is built into the structure of time itself. If he came alone, he leaves alone. If married, his wife goes with him. The Torah guards dignity even in poverty. But then the text turns tender and piercing. If the servant says, "I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go free," then his master brings him to the doorpost. His ear is pierced with an awe, and he serves forever. The ear, in Hebrew, is ozen, spelled Aleph, Zayin, Nun. Aleph is strength, the father. Zayin is a weapon, a cutting instrument. Nun is life extended. The ear is the organ of covenant hearing. At Sinai, Israel said, "We will hear and we will do." The servant who chooses love over autonomy presses his ear, the faculty of obedience against the door. The doorpost is mezuzah. Mem, zayin, vov, zayin, he. Water, weapon, hook, weapon, breath. The doorpost once held the blood of the lamb on Passover night. Now it receives the mark of chosen devotion. The same threshold that marked deliverance now marks love-bound service. It is as though the servant says, "Redemption brought me here. Love keeps me here." Pierced ear, voluntary servitude. Love stronger than freedom. The shadow stretches forward. A servant who would say, "I delight to do your will." A son who would take the form of an avad, whose obedience would not end at 6 years, but would pass through death into everlasting covenant. Then the text speaks of a daughter sold as a maidservant. The Torah does not romanticize poverty. There were households broken by famine, debts crushing fathers. Yet even here, protections rise like walls. She is not to be treated as disposable. If she does not please her master, she must be redeemed. If taken as a wife, she must receive food, clothing, and marital rights. If these are denied, she goes free without payment. In the ancient world, such vulnerability often meant silent suffering. But here, the Holy One bends down into hidden chambers. He legislates compassion. The covenant God does not overlook the voiceless. The structure of law becomes a shelter. Then comes a verse that strikes like iron, Whoever steals a man and sells him, or if he is found in his hand, shall surely be put to death. The sin is kidnapping, in Hebrew Gehenna Wivat, Nehevshesh. Nehevshesh is soul, breath, life. To steal a human being is to steal the image of God. Egypt had stolen Israel's bodies and crushed their spirits. The Torah plants a boundary like a flaming sword. No human life may be trafficked as property. The penalty is death. The weight of this judgment echoes across centuries of human history where this command was ignored. The God of Sinai declares that to commodify his image-bearer is a capital offense. And then another piercing word. He who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He who curses his father or mother shall surely be put to death. The severity unsettles modern ears. But in Hebrew thought, father and mother are not merely biological figures. They are co-creators with God. To strike them is to strike the source of one's life. To curse them, kalal, is to make light of, to treat as weightless. Yet kavod, honor, means weight, glory. To dishonor parents is to reject the chain of covenant transmission. Israel's survival depends on generational faithfulness. The household is the first sanctuary. To fracture it violently is to attack the future itself. Life for life. Eye for eye. Tooth for tooth. These words have been misunderstood as cruelty, but they are boundaries against escalation. In a world of vengeance spirals, Torah establishes proportion. Justice must not exceed injury. The phrase eye for eye in Hebrew, ayin taket, ayin, literally an eye under an eye. Taket can mean beneath, in place of. It implies measured equivalence, not unrestrained retaliation. The law restrains the human impulse toward excess. Even animals are addressed. If an ox gores a man and he dies, the ox is stoned. But if the owner knew the ox was dangerous and failed to restrain it, the owner bears guilt. Responsibility extends beyond direct action. Negligence is not invisible. The covenant community is accountable for foreseeable harm. There are laws about open pits, about borrowed donkeys, about fields burned by stray fire. The Torah dignifies the mundane. Holiness is not confined to altar and incense. It governs irrigation ditches and livestock disputes. Every detail of life falls under the gaze of the Holy One. Then the voice turns toward the vulnerable again. You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. Memory becomes moral compass. The stranger there lives among, but does not fully belong. Israel is commanded to remember the taste of foreign dust, the sting of outsider status. Covenant compassion flows from historical empathy. You shall not afflict any widow or orphan. If you afflict them and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry. The repetition is thunder. Cry, cry, hear, hear. The God of Sinai is not deaf to tears. His anger burns against exploitation of those without defenders. In Hebrew, the word for widow, almana, carries the sense of silent one. The orphan, yatam, root meaning to be alone. The Torah assures them, you are not unheard. Heaven leans close. There is instruction about lending money without interest to the poor, about returning a cloak taken as pledge before nightfall, for it may be his only covering. In what shall he sleep? The text asks tenderly. The law itself asks a compassionate question. Justice here is wrapped in mercy. You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. Speech is cut and tell. Words build or erode communal trust. To curse authority lightly is to destabilize order. Yet the same Torah that guards authority also binds it under divine judgment. Then comes a verse, enigmatic and layered, "You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk." 3 times this command appears in Torah, and here it rests among laws of harvest and first fruits. On the surface, it forbids a cruel culinary practice, mixing life-sustaining milk with the death of the offspring. But beneath, a pattern shimmers. Milk is nurture, life provision. To cook the kid in the very substance meant to sustain it is a grotesque inversion. It mingles life and death unnaturally. In Hebrew letters, the kid, Gimel, Dalet, Yod. Gimel moves, Dalet is door, Yod, the spark of divine life. The mother's milk chalof, Chet is fence, Lamed is shepherd's staff, Bet house. Milk is that which fences and shepherds life into the house. To boil the kid in the milk is to collapse boundaries, to confuse categories established in creation. Separation between life and death is sacred. Some see here a protest against pagan fertility rites, others hear an echo of a deeper pattern. Life must not be devoured by its own source. The Holy One preserves distinctions. He is not a God of chaotic blending, but of ordered harmony. Chapter 23 unfolds like a widening river. You shall not spread a false report. The word for false, shikar, is built of letters that stand on one leg, shin kofei, resh unstable shapes, compared to the sturdy letters of truth. Imit aleph, mem, taf, which span the alphabet, from beginning to middle to end. Falsehood is structurally unstable. It cannot bear weight. You shall not follow the majority to do evil. Justice is not democratic. It is covenantal. The many may be wrong. The few may stand alone with truth. The Sabbath principle returns even for ox and donkey, even for the son of the maidservant, even for the sojourner. Rest is universal mercy. The land itself must rest in the 7th year, that the poor may eat what grows freely, and what they leave the beasts may consume. Creation participates in covenant rhythm. 3 pilgrimage festivals are commanded in leavened bread, harvest in gathering. Time is sanctified. Israel's calendar becomes a choreography of remembrance. They are to appear before the Lord 3 times a year, not empty-handed. First fruits belong to Him. Gratitude precedes consumption. Then promise stretches ahead like dawn beyond desert hills. An angel is sent before them, bearing the name within him. My name is in him. The name is essence and authority. The angel will guard them and bring them into the place prepared. But they must heed his voice. Obedience is the path of protection. Little by little, the nations will be driven out not all at once, lest the land become desolate. Growth must match capacity. Even conquest follows measured wisdom. The boundaries of Israel are described, from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, from the wilderness to the river. Promise requires faithfulness. Then the narrative ascends again. Moses is told to come up to God with Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders. They bow from a distance. Moses alone draws near into the cloud. The people remain below. Boundaries still guard holiness. Moses recounts all the words of God to the people, and they answer with one voice, "All the words which God has spoken, we will do." He writes the words, "An altar is built at the foot of the mountain, 12 pillars for the 12 tribes. Young men offer burnt offerings and peace offerings of oxen." Moses takes half the blood and places it in basins. Half he sprinkles on the altar blood, dam, dalet, mem, door, water. Blood is the doorway of life, carried in liquid form. It represents the soul. The altar receives half. The people receive half. Covenant is shared life. He reads the book of the covenant in their hearing. Again they respond, "All that God has spoken, we will do, and we will hear." Nazav and Nishma, doing precedes understanding. Obedience opens perception. Moses sprinkles the blood on the people and says, "Behold, the blood of the covenant which God has made with you." The same pattern will echo generations later. "This is my blood of the covenant." Sinai foreshadows another covenant, sealed in blood. Then something astonishing occurs. Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 elders ascend. They see the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement of sapphire stone, clear as the heavens. Language strains toward glory. And he did not lay his hand on the nobles of Israel. They beheld God, and they ate and drank. A covenant meal in the presence of glory. Then God calls Moses higher still. The cloud covers the mountain 6 days. On the 7th day he calls from the midst of the cloud. 6 days of concealment. The seventh. The rhythm of creation again. The glory appears like a consuming fire on the mountain's summit. Fire above. Cloud surrounding. Mystery veiling majesty. Moses enters the cloud and goes up on the mountain. 40 days and 40 nights. Testing, transformation, waiting. Mishpatim began with servants and oxen, with daughters and debtors. It ends with sapphire pavement and devouring fire. The Torah refuses to separate the ordinary from the transcendent. The same God who legislates the return of a poor man's cloak descends in flame upon Sinai. Holiness is not abstraction. It is structured love. It protects the vulnerable, restrains vengeance, dignifies labor, sanctifies time, guards speech, and preserves life's boundaries. It shapes a people who reflect their Redeemer. And woven through the judgments are shadows of a greater servant, a greater covenant, a greater ascent. The pierced ear whispers of willing obedience. The blood anticipates a better word. The angel bearing the name foreshadows one who carries that name fully. At Sinai, Israel stands between fear and promise. The mountain burns, yet they are invited near. Law is given, yet mercy pulses within it. Mishpatim is grace taking form. The fire that terrified now illuminates the path of justice. And above the cloud, beyond the sapphire, beyond even Moses' ascent, the heart of the covenant beats steadfast love and faithfulness meeting together. Righteousness and peace kissing upon the mountain of God. And as Mishpatim settles into the memory of Israel, the Haftarah and the words of the Berit Kadasha rise beside it, bearing witness to the same covenant fire that burns against false freedom and calls the captive into true release. Jerusalem trembles beneath a dim and heavy sky. In Jeremiah chapter 34, verses 8 through 12, Babylon surrounds the city. The armies of Nebuchadnezzar press hard against the gates. Famine tightens its grip. Fear moves through the narrow streets like a cold wind. And in that hour of desperation, King Zedekiah gathers the people in the house of the Lord and makes a covenant before God to proclaim liberty. The Hebrew word for liberty is doror. Doror means release from slavery. It is the same word used in the Torah, in the portion of Mishpatim, where a Hebrew servant is to be released in the 7th year. 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free. That release is called Deror. So now, in the shadow of siege, Jerusalem reaches back to Sinai. Doors open, chains fall. Brothers release brothers. Women long confined step into open air. For a brief and fragile moment, the city breathes in obedience to the covenant. The people speak the words in the name of Yahuwah. Blood seals the promise. Deror is proclaimed throughout Jerusalem. Then the Babylonian army withdraws. The pressure eases, fear recedes, and with it, repentance. The same hands that unlocked chains now seize them again. The same voices that proclaimed Deror force their servants back into bondage. Men and women who had tasted freedom are dragged again into subjection. The covenant just sworn before Yahweh is broken. Jeremiah stands and speaks the word of Yahweh. You made a covenant before me to proclaim Deror, liberty, each to his brother. And you turned and profaned my name. The Hebrew word for profaned is kalal. It means to pierce, to wound, to hollow out. They hollowed out the covenant. They pierced the very name they invoked. What was spoken in fear was not rooted in obedience. You proclaimed Deror to one another, says the Lord. Now I proclaim Deror to you, to the sword, to famine, to pestilence. The same word, release. They would not release their brothers from slavery. Now they will be released from the land itself. Jerusalem will fall. Babylon will return. The people who rebuilt Egypt inside their gates will taste exile again. Mishpatim was never merely social structure. It was living memory. You were slaves in Egypt. You were set free. Therefore you shall not enslave your brother. To deny Deror is to forget the Red Sea. To forget redemption is to invite captivity. Across the sea and centuries later, Corinth stands under another empire. The streets hum with trade and temptation. Idols fill the temples. Desire and power move openly through the city. And to the believers there, the apostle writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? He names the patterns that enslave the human soul. Sexual immorality, idolatry, adultery, theft, greed, drunkenness, reviling, swindling. These are not merely behaviors. They are chains. They bind the heart as surely as iron binds the wrist. Do not be deceived. Sin promises freedom, but delivers bondage. And then a sentence that opens like light breaking over dark water. And such were some of you. Were, past tense. You were washed. Water again. The waters that once divided Israel from Pharaoh. The waters that cleansed the priest before entering holy space. The waters that signaled new beginning, washed not by ritual alone, but by the Spirit of the living God. You were sanctified. Set apart. Drawn from common use into sacred purpose. As Israel was drawn from Egypt into covenant identity, you were justified in the name of the Lord Yeshua and by the Spirit of our God. The name once profaned in Jerusalem becomes in Corinth the place of restoration. In Jeremiah, covenant was cut and broken. In Messiah, covenant is sealed and kept. Jerusalem proclaimed Deror and rebuilt chains. Corinth is warned not to return to chains now that cleansing has come. The thread from Sinai runs unbroken through prophet and apostle alike. You were slaves, you were set free. Do not enslave again, neither your brother nor your own soul. The fire that burned on the mountain still burns in the purposes of God. The word spoken through Jeremiah still echoes through broken walls. The letter sent to Corinth still confronts hearts tempted to drift. And true Doror is not temporary obedience born of fear, but lasting transformation born of covenant faithfulness. Having been released, will you bind again? Or will you walk as those who remember Egypt, washed, sanctified, justified, and truly free?